Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Liberty Podcast. We are the Minutemen, and we thank you guys for your time. This is our first podcast, so just bear with us. We're going to get better as we go. We thank you for being here. We're going to discuss Federalist Paper number 1 in this podcast. And yeah, make sure you guys like and subscribe the video if you like it. And then also follow us on Parler, follow us on Twitter, and follow us on Facebook before we get kicked off. Um, and so, yeah, we'll start off with Federalist Paper number 1. Would you like to say anything at first, my friend, or no?
Yeah, I'll just go say, just thank you for coming on. We're a brand new site. We just launched our website. Our main goal is to educate Americans, on American history, what our founding documents are, the principles outlined in the the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Federalist Papers, and teach them, to the new generation of Americans. Each generation is responsible for preserving those principles and putting them into practice. And it's important that we keep educating Americans and teaching them about why these principles are so important. So that's kind of our goal with these podcasts, with these essays. So, and we want to hear from you too, so if you have something that you would like to hear us talk about or write about or discuss, always feel free to send us an email or contact us on social media. We'll have our information in the description below the video. So feel free to reach out to us, and we really appreciate your support.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. So we're going to start off with discussing Federalist Paper number 1. If you guys have not read Federalist Paper number 1, go and read it. It was written by Alexander Hamilton. And honestly, like after reading it, it's a really great document to read, especially in regards to our current time that we are experiencing here in 2020. Um, it's almost as if, I don't know if you saw this, but when I was reading it, it's like Alexander Hamilton is calling upon the Americans back then to decide if they're going to follow the Constitution, to decide if they're going to ratify it, because that's what these essays were written for. But it's almost as if he's talking to Americans today, you know,
Right.
because it's determining like if we're going to continue to follow the Constitution today, follow our Declaration, follow our way of life, or are we going to switch to anarchy or socialism or something like that? I found that he like really said that perfectly when he stated, and I really like this statement, by the way. But when he says, the fate of an empire, in many respects, the most interesting in the world, it has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. And he said that in the first paragraph. Yeah, closer to the end. But I like that statement because, the United States of America is the most interesting, empire. That's what he uses, the terms empire, but it is a republic. It is the most interesting republic in the world, and we have been given the great gift of determining that question of if societies of men are we really capable of establishing good government by reflecting and choosing, or do we continue to fall back into the previous patterns of history? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, a lot of the founders and a lot of the framers of the Constitution and a lot of the people who supported the Constitution made it clear that this was, when they were drafting the Constitution and supporting it, it was meant to last for generations. This wasn't just something for the 18th century. This was a document that was supposed to govern people. It was supposed to be a timeless document, basically. It was supposed to be everlasting principles. It was supposed to be a basic framework for government that could work in all centuries. And what I find interesting is I highly encourage everybody to read the Federalist Papers, but I also encourage people to read, and I don't think enough credit is given to the anti-Federalists too, because
Yeah.
although they were opposed to the Constitution, they were opposed to it because they did not. They thought the Constitution gave the government too much power. So I think it's also valuable to read what they have to say. And one of the main anti-federalists was he used the pseudonym Brutus, and in his first essay, which was written like a week before Hamilton wrote Federalist Paper number 1, he says, if the Constitution offered to your acceptance be a wise one, calculated to preserve the invaluable blessings of liberty, to secure the inestimable rights of mankind, and promote human happiness, then, if you accept it, you will lay a lasting foundation of happiness for millions yet unborn. Generations to come will rise up and call you blessed.
Yeah.
So again, this this document was not meant just for the people of 1787, 1788. This was meant for people living in the 19th century, in the 20th century, even today in the 21st century. And Hamilton, just like you stated, the the preservation of the Constitution depends on people being able to reflect on it, and to say, is this a good document to govern us? And that's a question every generation has to ask itself. So I totally agree. Hamilton is not just speaking to the people of his time, but he's speaking to future generations as well.
Yeah, that was a great point, and I really liked that quote you used from the Anti-Federalist. Um, yeah, that all of that was great. Um, other points that Mr. Hamilton makes in Federalist One, which definitely speaks to modern Americans, I think are the points that he makes in the third paragraph. And I wanted to read the third paragraph because it's a little bit shorter, um, and it's not too long. But he starts out where he says, among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution, I don't know if I said that right, of the power, emolument, and consequence of the offices. Oh, my bad. Consequence of the offices, I'm sorry, I lost the line. They hold under the state establishments and the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country or will flatter themselves with fair prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government. And, I one thing that we have to understand is that if modern Americans, if we do as a group of people decide to reinstitute our constitution, we're also going to have to deal with these two types of people that Mr. Hamilton discusses, right? There's definitely, groups of people in power who are going to resist following the constitution because it will create a risk for them losing the power, the perks, and the status that they have currently under our straying away from the constitution. And then of course we have the second class of men, or the second class of people that Mr. Hamilton discussed, who will resist the Constitution. And these people are kind of currently arguing for more destruction of it. But these people have a corrupted ambition or perverted desire, and they want to try to increase their power, their perks, or their status by confusing their countrymen. And I don't know. For me, like the mainstream media comes to mind. As well as huge business organizations and a lot of celebrities as well. And this isn't just a calling upon our ancestors. This is a calling upon us, and we have to recognize that there will be, and there currently are, those two classes of men. And I find that interesting because it's like, I, again, that makes this document so interesting, is because it's really not just talking to the Americans back then. This is talking to Americans today. Like, we have both those classes of men. um, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to again go back to Brutus, what he said, and he says in his first essay, "But remember, when the people once part with power, they can seldom or never resume it again, but by force. Many instances can be
Dang, that
produced
was
in which,
good.
yeah, no, I mean, again, the Anti-Federalists make so many great points too, which is why I think they're very underrated to say. We read the Federalist Papers, and the Federalists are great. I mean, Thomas Jefferson described them as like the greatest, philosophical essays that Americans have produced. But it's also worth looking at the Anti-Federalists because they too were concerned with government power, even though Hamilton is referring to the anti-federalists when he says, people who want to keep their power. He's referring to people who are, the governors of states, or are in power in the states, because those are the ones who are going to lose their power. But Brutus continues. He says, many instances can be produced in which the people have voluntarily increased the powers of their rulers, but few, if any, in which rulers have willingly abridged their authority. This is a sufficient reason to induce you to be careful, in the first instance, how you deposit the powers of government. And unfortunately, that's what we're seeing today in the United States. Congress, the reality is Congress doesn't really do anything anymore. It's just kind of a partisan peanut gallery where people yell back and forth at each other. Really, the power is concentrated in the president. It seems like the president is the one, he can sign an executive order and this is for all presidents, just by the way, this is not Republican or Democrat. A president can just write an executive order. It has the force of law. The courts, can just rewrite laws with their opinions. And then you have the federal bureaucracy, which is composed of people that nobody ever elected. Nobody even knows. They're
Yeah.
unaccountable to the people, and they're making the decisions. And unfortunately, we, the people, have given them that power. And as Brutus says, it's hard when you give people power, it's really difficult to try to get that power back. So that's why, again, Brutus said this in his essay, and Hamilton is saying this in his essay. Just really think this out, really think about the Constitution, because when you give power, which the people are doing to the government, it's going to be very hard to take it back. So just be careful what you give it, because you're not going to get a return on it.
That's a really great point. And I just like I almost want to hear that whole statement again, because it was so great. And it's so true that, once the people are in power, they don't want to give up that power. And I think that's such a brilliant point you made, especially today. And I think you can see this very clearly with lots of career politicians. And,
yeah,
they just go in there, and it's nothing like what the founders did. I mean, George Washington went in and did president 2 terms. And then he was like, I'm out, I'm going home, Nowadays, it's a whole career. And I think it's because a lot of people are seeing it, and they want to go in for that power. And that's something I think that the American people need to be aware of in regards to both Republican or Democrat, whoever you're voting for, is this person just want to go in and gain power? And if we give them this power, is this good? Or do these people actually want to serve the people? And
exactly.
I just think that's something that we need to consider when voting, whatever side you're voting for. We're not pushing one side or the other. So yeah. Okay, should we continue? Are there any quotes?
Absolutely.
Are there any quotes that you want to specifically pull out?
Well, jumping a little bit ahead in the Federalist Papers, kind of towards the middle section to the end, Hamilton is right. He says the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty. The problem with the Articles of Confederation is that the central government was pretty weak. The states had all the power, and the central government was kind of just like a figurehead. It really couldn't do anything, and that's not good either. You need a government that can. The first primary reason why you set up a government, is to protect the rights of the people. That's kind of the only, the main reason why you have a government at all. But you need a government that will, defend you from domestic insurrection and from enemies abroad. And you need one, that can regulate taxes, that can, manage trade between countries and manage trade within the states. So yeah, Hamilton is right that we do need an energetic government, but what we don't need is, a behemoth, something that's, that over encompasses the states. And that's why I really appreciate about the Constitution is one of the principles, and we discussed this in our first Liberty essay, federalism. It divides the power between the federal government and the state governments, and then separation of powers, it divides the power between the legislative branch, the executive, and the judicial, just because the founders recognized that we need a strong central government, but we have to divide the power too. Because again, as Brutus said, when you give power, don't expect it to be handed back.
Exactly. And that's such a great point too, because it goes back to what we were saying earlier, where right now it seems that really the only one who has the most power in our government is the president, which is
Right.
unfortunate because we those checks and balances that are implemented by our Constitution are truly they're really a revolutionary idea in regards to government, and they do allow for a a better form of government for the people. Um, so that's just a great point. That yes, while we do want a strong centralized government, we want one that is well developed with fair checks and balances, which the Constitution does implement. Um, so great point there. If I could make a point, my friend, I wanted to point out in the fourth paragraph. Um, I really appreciate that Alexander Hamilton, he gives the opposing side the benefit of the doubt. So the anti-federalists and the people who opposed ratification. Um, I appreciate that he gave them the benefit of the doubt because he says, and a further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. And this is very hard to do, especially nowadays in regards to political opponents. Um, whether most of our audience perhaps is more on the conservative side. So for those of you would be more leftists and Democrats and things like that. But this is still the right thing to do. And I really appreciate that Mr. Hamilton pointed that out. And this is something I wish that we would re-implement into our culture is that give the other side the benefit of the doubt. Um, Not always, that doesn't mean be a fool, right? That does not mean be a fool. When you know somebody's purposely doing something wrong to try and get at you, be wise. But he gives the anti-federalists, these people who he disagrees with, the benefit of the doubt. And I like that point because it's like only God can judge the heart, you know, and we're not God. So let God judge the hearts of these men. Um, and it is also fair to say that many people, um, lots of college students, perhaps high school students, etc., on the left, a lot of these people are just ill-informed, unfortunately. And so I think it would be better in our interest to pray for them, um, to become well-informed and not just well-informed, of course, pray for the salvation of their souls as well. But I think that would be a lot better is if we could actually pray for our opponents and try to give them the benefit of the doubt, not all the time. But I just like that Mr. Hamilton said. What are your thoughts on that? Um,
No, I absolutely agree. And recently I was looking at some YouTube videos, and I saw something. I saw Jimmy Carter, I think a few years ago, was on the Stephen Colbert show, and he said, and Jimmy Carter is a Democratic president, and he says he's praying for President Trump, and
yeah,
and I think you know that the problem is, I think that we've lost religion in public life. And the founders recognized the importance of having religion because they thought religion was the basis of having a moral society. So the problem is we're more interested, in getting those little video bits, like on YouTube, you see those videos of this person bashing this person or owning this person or destroying this person. Yeah, that's fine and all for maybe like, 5 minutes of entertainment. But
right.
that doesn't heal us as a country, that divides us because
Yep.
because when you start seeing those videos, you want to continue to see them. You want to continue to see, people from either side bashing each other and going at each other. But what we really need is we need to pray to each other. We need to recognize, hey, he's as human as I am. Are my principles pure? Because often we accuse the other side, and this is a basic human, thing of human nature. We accuse the other side, saying, oh, they're motivated by this or that, they have bad influences. Well, have we checked our own motives? Have we checked
Right.
the reasons why are we doing it for selfish purposes? Are we doing it for the purest things? So again, I totally agree with you. We need to give people the benefit of the doubt. Not every side is paid off by, a bazillionaire. We need to
Right.
give, and there are some people, who have ulterior motives, but for the most part, let's give people the benefit of the doubt. Let's stop trying to destroy each other, and then maybe we can find common ground, and then we can appreciate again what the Constitution has to offer.
Yeah. And then that also brings us back, of course, to our um, the statements in the Declaration of what we value. If we're able to pray for each other rather than try and divide each other, we can also then become more unified and come back to following all these principles in our Declaration and in our Constitution. So Yeah, we are at 19 minutes, so we're probably need to wrap it up now. But any last thoughts or
Well, I just want to say I think this was in terms of the Federalist Papers, this was a great kind of way to to start the conversation. You know, and at the same time, a lot of people were writing essays as well too, and were conversing. But I think what's really important to take away from this is they weren't inspired to do this violently. They weren't fighting each other physically over the
yeah,
Constitution. They wrote letters, they wrote papers, they wrote to the people, they wrote to each other. They were having a conversation, and it was a respectful conversation. you know Hamilton doesn't you know insult the people that he's writing to. He's respecting them, and he's saying let's debate this. And that's basically what we need in America right now. So this is a great way to start the
yes,
Federalist Papers, and it's also a good lesson for America that the only thing that you resolve issues is through dialogue and conversation.
right. Thank you for pointing that out. That's a great point. Um, so yeah, okay, that's Liberty Podcast One, guys. We want to keep these short because we know people's attention spans, like ours included, are pretty short. So um, we thank you guys for your time. Um, stop by for podcast two, which will be coming out at the end of August, and we will have a new Liberty principle up here in the first. We're aiming for August 1st, but give us a few days if nothing comes up by then. Um, and yeah, I think that's all we have. Well, thank you again for watching and listening. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.
Amen.
Amen.